If there's one thing that we have learned over the last 18 months, it is that we are all responsible for our own health and wellness. There's so much information out there and misinformation. It's really hard to decipher what's right, what's wrong. But the one thing that stands true is the healthier we are, the better off we are. In this episode, we talked to Brian Sanders, who is the filmmaker behind an upcoming documentary called The Food Lies. Really excited for you guys to hear this one. I enjoyed it, and I think you'll have some great takeaways as to how we can all improve our own health and wellness. This is the No Excuse to Miss podcast. Welcome to the No Excuse to Miss podcast. I am your host, Scott Volkortson. This week, we are going to dive into a little bit of a different topic than what we normally do. It's one that I feel applies to all of us, and even more so given the past 18 months and how health and wellness has been at the forefront for so many of us. I'm excited to have Brian Sanders on the show. He is the filmmaker behind the Food Lies documentary, the host of the Top 5 Nutrition podcast, Peak Human, and an international speaker. Welcome to the show, Brian.
Hey, Scott. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming on. I appreciate it. I'm excited about this one.
Absolutely. Yeah, health is important, man. Everyone needs to think about that, especially in the past year and a half.
Yeah, it's something I've always been passionate about from the nutrition and fitness side of stuff. But then like the last 18 months, I think has been an awakening for a lot of people of, why it's so important and why taking care of yourself before disease or anything hits is vitally important to us. So as we dive into this, doing my research, I found that you were a mechanical engineer by trade, or that's what you're educated in originally. Mm-hmm. How did you get into the nutrition and this side of things?
Yeah, it was sort of a circuitous path. Yeah, I mean, I have that science background. I think that helped get me into the nutrition world because, engineers kind of think differently, I guess. You think of the root cause of the problem. You kind of come more from an unbiased approach. You think of systems, right? Instead of just like one thing. And also, I think it helped that I wasn't in the nutrition world or a doctor because they kind of are biased and kind of indoctrinated, I'll say, into a system of thinking where they're taught some things in med school. And I mean, not much on nutrition, actually. They're really not taught much about nutrition, but they buy into it all and they think that's all there is. And a lot of doctors I know in the mainstream think that diet doesn't really matter because no one follows it and they don't see good results because they give the same bad dietary advice and no one ever follows it. It never works. And they come back and they're still sick. They're still overweight. And so they're just dishing out pills. I get it because I know a lot of doctors, right? But then I have one doctor friend that switched over to the dark side, which I will say is the light side. They've seen the light. And so I work with Dr. Gary now, but he's kind of, clued me into what goes on in the medical system. And it's completely backwards from, the new paradigm that I see a lot of people following, a lot of people getting super healthy. And I guess my quick other story of how I got into it is my parents. So about 8 years ago, I lost both of my parents. So that's right when I was about 30. And they just had these chronic diseases that we think are normal. And so obviously that's a wake-up call for me. I'm 30, I'm pretty young. I'm also not able to just eat whatever I want anymore, right? You're like, I have to focus on this. I was athletic my whole life, but I still was just gaining weight and just having little health conditions that I thought were normal. So all of those things led me to read up on diet. I got into, tons of stuff. Mark Sisson, I'll say, is a big influence. People may have heard of him. He wrote the Primal Blueprint. Yeah. He's really great. Yeah, so I got into that stuff and just kept going down that rabbit hole, got healthier and healthier, changed simple things in my diet. It's not like I'm one of these people weighing food or counting calories. I just made a few changes. Everything got better. Lost 4 pant sizes. Just cured all these little problems I had. And then 4 years ago, I decided to create this film because I saw way too much misinformation out there. Specifically, I saw What the Health, which is a stupid vegan propaganda film that came out 4 years ago. And I decided I need to make my own film.
Well, that's awesome. Where do you think, and for those that don't know who Mark Sisson is, I believe he's like in his mid 60s now.
Yeah, he's probably 67. Yeah.
Yeah, he's in better shape and probably more active than most people much younger than him. And he doesn't look like he's anywhere close to that age.
He's ripped. He might even be 68. He just had a birthday a month ago. I went and played Ultimate Frisbee with him in Miami. It was like a life goal of mine. And he's out there. We were playing with all ages. Like there was an 18-year-old and he was running around with that 18-year-old keeping up. It was amazing.
Which I think where we all aspire to get to is, not only age and, but living life fully when we get to that age, not just merely existing or being kept alive by.
Yeah, the pharmaceuticals. Yeah, it's a health
Yes.
span. Sisson talks about this a lot. It's health span, not lifespan we need to care about. And yeah, I mean, who cares if you're like 102 and you've been in a hospital bed for 20 years?
Exactly.
He's like, I'll die at 95 out there playing Ultimate Frisbee, and I believe he will. He'll be doing something. Maybe he'll be playing tennis, maybe a little less active, but he'll be doing something.
How do you think we got to this point of so much misinformation out there? Do you think it starts a little bit like in our school systems where we're taught the antiquated or wherever it came from, the food pyramid?
Yeah.
And, I even see like my youngest son is a junior in high school and I see what their daily lunches are like. And it's really sad to see that's what our kids are being taught is what you should be eating every day.
Well, the education system teaches them a lot of things that are wrong. So we could go.
That could be a whole nother podcast.
Oh, I would love to do that podcast because as I got red pilled on nutrition, we'll call it red pilled. I kind of got red pilled on the rest of the world, seeing through the matrix and how the rest of the world works, especially with the last year and a half. And yeah, I realized the education system is sort of working against us in many ways and kind of indoctrinating our youth. But the food thing is big too, because not only are they teaching them in school, like actual classes saying, yeah, red meat's bad. Obviously, we got to cut down on meat to save the planet and all this stupid stuff that actually is completely bogus when you look into it. But they're also eating that food. Like you said, the school lunches. So they're getting both sides of it. And the school lunches are dictated by the bad dietary guidelines. And these dietary guidelines go back to about the 50s, really. So in the US, President Eisenhower had a heart attack. And this was this time when everyone was smoking. We were just getting in all these bad seed oils. These were just coming into our diet that we never had before, these industrial seed oils, which I think are at the root of a lot of problems. So it was no wonder we were starting to have some heart disease because, a lot of smoking, a lot of other things going on. And the story goes from there. I don't know. I don't want to get into every little detail, but there was the McGovern report, there was Ansel Keys, there was some science done basically where, Eisenhower's like, what do we do? Like, let's figure this out. And a guy named Ansel Keys had an idea that it was saturated fat. And he did some studies, he did some kind of bogus correlations. He looked at 22 studies ultimately, but he picked 7 that fit his pattern. He's like, oh yeah, look at these 7 countries. And the more saturated fat you have, the more heart disease. And actually there was another guy named John Yudkin. He's like a British guy. And he kind of had an opposite theory. He's like, every time these different, places, well, especially British Empire, right? We took over a country and we brought in sugar, flour, and oil. And then that country got fat and sick. He kind of could see it around the world that it was actually the sugar and the refined grains he was mainly looking at. And he's like, that's why we're getting fat and sick. And no one really listened to him. Ultimately, Ansel Keys won, opened the door to the food industry, right? So now if fat's bad, you have to replace fat with more sugar and more refined grains. And guess what America has? We have a ton of fields of corn, wheat, and soy. And we ultimately ended up subsidizing them and making them super cheap. And so huge green light to the processed food industry, right? So this food industry is hugely, wow. Like, how could it get better for them? You're giving us them the cheapest ingredients, a green light to stuff all of your food with the cheapest ingredients, put it in a box and label it as heart healthy. Ooh, this is Cheerios, heart healthy Cheerios. We gave you like 3 cents of monocropped wheat, covered in honey, and not even real honey. I mean, it's corn syrup. And we're going to sell this to you for $5.50 and say it's heart healthy. We just made, a ton of money. And that's why it keeps going. So I'm kind of answering a lot of your questions, I guess, is, how did we get here? Why does this happen? Why do we have these guidelines? It was based on some bad science. This was, the real guidelines started around the 60s and 70s, and then the 80s was the food pyramid. And there's also even a monetary factor of just them trying to feed the food, like the food stamps program even plays a role, the SNAP program, whatever it was called back then. They actually did. I was doing a lot of research for the film, and they did have a food pyramid or a dietary guideline that was actually more reasonable. It was based more on whole foods, and it had meat and dairy and fruits and vegetables, and it's pretty reasonable. If people just eat whole foods, I think they're fine. I'm more in the meat-based camp, but if you're eating whole foods, you're fine. So that's what the first dietary guidelines actually was just a lot of that. And then, well, the story goes, they're like, how are we going to pay for this? You realize that the government has to pay for the food stamp program, or this is going to go into the budgets for all these government things like the military or nursing homes or schools, right? Just like you said, this is full circle back to schools. Why are the school lunches so bad? Well, they got to be cheap. What's cheap? Monocropped corn, wheat, and soy. So if we say that this is healthy, and we're like, oh, well, fat's bad, we'll just fill up on these cheap refined grains and sugar-filled stuff, then everyone's happy, because the big lobbyists and the big food people are like, yes, absolutely, this is exactly what we want people to eat. And then everyone's off the hook on the food company because they're saying, hey, well, it's healthy, we're just following the guidelines. And it's the classic American story of patting people's backs and lobbying and the whole thing of just people making money. And next thing you know, you have 88% of Americans metabolically unhealthy, and everyone's a mess.
And I think from what I have found, then by the time, like you said, once you start turning 30, you realize you couldn't eat some of the same foods. But I think by that point, there's so much misinformation and so much confusion out there that people don't necessarily know where to turn or what actually is healthy anymore.
Mm-hmm.
You can go online and one website says, well, you have to go vegan, plant-based. And then you have like the other side with the carnivore diet. But the one thing that I like about what I've read on your stuff is how simple and straightforward you kind of make. I believe you call it the Sapien Diet.
Yeah.
How simple and straightforward you make that to, and like you said, you don't overcomplicate it with tracking macros, weighing food, and doing all that. But explain a little bit how you simplify that, like some of the basic tenets of what the Sapien Diet is.
Yeah, sure. Sapien Diet, I mean, I'm trying to just get people to realize that it is this simple, and we just need a name for it. And my best guess was Sapien. It's like, we are all Homo sapiens. We can all eat this simple diet, and there's some simple truths. And it took me a while to figure it all out and get it this simple. But really, it's if we are eating whole foods and we're embracing animal foods and we're cutting out processed foods, we can be healthy. And this was from years of research, looking around the world. I'm looking at vegan websites. I'm watching vegan videos. I'm looking into the blue zones. People are like, oh yeah, the blue zones. There's all these people who live to 100 and they're so plant-based. You look into it, and they're, Okinawans example. Yeah, they're eating a lot of sweet potatoes. That's what they had. And they're eating also a bunch of seafood, and they regard pork as a longevity food, and they eat it when they can get it. They don't always have it, but they eat it. So they're eating fish, pork, vegetables, sweet potatoes. This was, now they have more rice than sweet potatoes, but this is the Okinawan diet back in the day. And yes, they live long. I'm like, hey, great. You're eating a great diet. You're eating a bunch of whole foods. there's so many other things they're doing well. They have a great sense of community and sense of purpose. They regard their elderly, that, you know, they have a sense of purpose in their old age, close-knit families. They're walking around, exercising. You know, all these blue zones have the same story, where the diet is almost an afterthought because of all the other healthy things they do. They don't drink a lot. They don't smoke a lot. They exercise more. They take care of their health. And all of them are just basically different versions of whole food diets that all include animal foods. And some of that is even more kind of shady, because when the blue zones people went around, you know, some of them places they visited, it was during Lent, where they like gave up meat for a month or something. So it's really skewed, but it's a lot of bias going on, and them just picking, you know, places that fit the bill. But I mean, you could go to look at other data. I mean, right now, actually, Hong Kong has the highest life expectancy in the world. They live the longest, and they also have the most meat consumption. They have the highest meat consumption in the world. So, I mean, I could do my own red zones study and go look at all the red meat populations that are actually eating red meat in a healthy way, which is with whole foods, you know, instead of processed foods along with it. And I could show how great everyone's doing. You know, I know tens of thousands of people through, you know, social media just doing these meat-based diets of different sorts, and they're all doing amazing, healing crazy illnesses and reversing diseases, getting off medications, losing hundreds of pounds. So it's all out there. If you look, it's just people are kind of mainly looking in the wrong place. So okay, so I'll get back to Sapien Diet. I kind of said it. It's very simple. If in the highest level, it's like, what do all good diets have in common, and what do all good diets leave out? And when you look around the world and throughout history, you know, ancient history, recent history, hunter-gatherers, anything you look at, it's a simple framework, is that these people highly regarded animal foods. They ate, you know, they ate the nose to tail. They were eating all the organs. They're eating everything, the fat, the bone marrow, eggs and seafood and all this stuff. So that's what all good diets have in common. And they're also based on other whole foods. So yeah, and then the plant foods, it's whatever they could find in their area, local, seasonal fruits and vegetables, tubers, whatever they had. And that's it. And what they all left out were the sugar, flour, oil. Just the sugar, flour, oils, right? It's the sugar, the refined grains, and the vegetable oils, these new vegetable oils. That's none of them really had that. I mean, like, you can look at any population in the world, and I'll bet you they're doing this exact pattern. They're avoiding those three processed ingredients. Those are the three things that are in all processed foods, basically, right? Everything in the middle of the store in a box or bag is just different versions of sugar, flour, and oil mixed together with some fake flavorings. So yeah, in the simplest terms, that's what Sapien Diet is. On a more specific level, what I like to do is build my meal around, you know, animal protein, you know, steak, eggs. Like, I eat this stuff every day. And then I have specific plant foods I add to it that have low anti-nutrients. So I don't know if everyone's familiar with anti-nutrients. It's sort of something no one talks about. But an example would be oxalates. I actually drank a lot of kale and spinach shakes. Like, I got into this craze like 6 years ago, and I was chugging like kale and spinach shakes every day. And that actually is a ton of oxalates. So these plants have these anti-nutrients. So they're just chemical compounds that make animals not want to eat them, right? This is their only defense mechanism. And they actually bind minerals and make it so humans can't really absorb them. And they also happen to make people sick in different ways. Like, oxalates is why people have kidney stones. So I was reading on a lot of vegan websites, and they're warning, you know, vegan sites like, hey, watch out for oxalates. You can't just eat a ton of raw spinach and kale and all this type of stuff. You need to figure it, you know, mix it up. Don't eat so much. Cook it. There's all kind, you know, there's phytates and there's lectins, and I mean, gluten is actually, you know, one that people have heard of. But yeah, so you should pick foods. This is a bit more nuanced, but if you want to get into it, is pick foods that these plant foods that don't have a lot of these chemical compounds in them. Because a lot of people seem to have problems with them, and people, when they cut them out, they notice like, oh, I cut out gluten and I feel amazing, or like, oh, I cut out lectins. You know, there's a lectin-free diet, and people, you know, have amazing transformations, especially if they have autoimmune disease too. A lot of these things are triggering them, and they don't know it. So I'm throwing a lot at you. But hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And I think, a lot of us have read, like Jordan Peterson's daughter, I believe it's
Mhm.
Michaela, that basically healed a lot of the ailments and bone issues and things that she had by going completely carnivore. So what do you say to the people that, especially like where I'm located in the Midwest, we seem to be a little bit behind like some of the more advanced nutrition protocols.
Mm-hmm.
So you'll hear a lot of people, especially if they have high cholesterol or have had a heart issue, their doctor almost recommends zero red meat.
Mm-hmm.
But I've talked to a lot of people that completely dispute that argument and talk about all the benefits of the different red meat. So I guess my question is there. And then how do you stand on like grass fed, grass finished versus grain fed?
Yeah, I'll start with that one. It's a very nuanced topic, and I actually have a company called Nose to Tail that's very into regenerative ag and grass finished and doing everything correctly. So I do have that on the side of grass fed, and I could probably just tell you all about how great it is, and you have to eat it and buy from me and all this type of stuff. But I won't. I won't because I don't think it's true. I think you need to get whatever meat you can afford and what you're going to eat consistently, and that's fine. And it's like all cows spend about 2/3 of their life on pasture anyway. They're out there eating grass anyway. There's a cow calf operation that they're with their mom and they're eating grass and milk, and then they move to a feedlot at the end of their life. And yeah, it's not great, and I'd say definitely don't support that. And if you can move towards grass-fed meat and go to your local farmers market and all that, absolutely 100% do that. Yeah, buy from me if you want, but you don't have to. Don't think that that's necessary to be healthy. It's sort of a last 1% thing. And you're talking about, yeah, people who maybe aren't super into nutrition. Yeah, maybe out of the Midwest are not like nutrition nerds, or like these people in Santa Monica, these vegans that are just obsessed with all this stuff. And I, that's fine. Go eat some meat, eat some whole foods, and you're done. If people cut out the sugar and the flour and the oil, but the thing is, that's a lot of things. All of a sudden, you can't use ketchup, right? That's just corn syrup and it has like soybean oil in it or something. There's all kinds of stuff going on in all these ingredients. So I'm not saying it's super simple or easy, but if you're eating steak and potatoes, that's a good meal for a reason. That's like known as a classic American meal. There's nothing really wrong with steak and potatoes. I mean, some people with diabetes might want to type 2 diabetes might want to, cut down on the potatoes because it's really starchy, but really a healthy person who's not eating, seed oils and all these excess sugars and grains, they could eat steak and potatoes their whole life and be perfectly healthy. So I'd say embrace the animal foods, cut out the processed foods, and maybe don't even worry about getting all these vegetables. That's where I've come. You just talked about Michaela Peterson. Jordan Peterson did the same thing. They cut out all the vegetables and they healed. And a lot of people are doing that. I'm friends with, Dr. Sean Baker, the carnivore guys, Dr. Paul Saladino, like all these people. I've been friends with them for years. I know all the ins and outs of it. I just don't think you need to go full carnivore. But they're kind of spearheading this movement. We're showing people, thousands and thousands of people doing this and being super healthy and fine. And I think vegetables are a little bit of a myth where just because our modern view of a supermarket having this entire rainbow of fruits and vegetables, everyone thinks that this is what we have to eat. And I think it's a lot of correlation where healthy people are told to eat more vegetables and they have all these other healthy lifestyle habits and they're doing so many things and they don't drink a lot and they don't smoke and they exercise and this, and they happen to eat a lot of vegetables. And I think part of it is that's just a proxy for not eating a lot of trash. If you're filling your diet up with a tons of vegetables, that means you're just not eating Twinkies and Doritos. So, and you're doing all the other healthy habits. So of course you're going to do better, but I don't think there's anything magical about vegetables. So I think this is good news for a bunch of people in America that aren't like, man, this guy's telling me I have to get healthy. I'm going to have to eat like a quinoa salad with kale and this and that. I'm saying not at all. I'm saying go eat a steak. Eat delicious meals. I'm eating for breakfast, I'm eating sausage, like a good beef sausage, 3 eggs, maybe a piece of bacon on the side, avocado, and I'm eating all kinds of delicious stuff. Dinner is, big steak and sauteed mushrooms and onions, and this is delicious.
And I think one of the big things there is it's so much more sustainable. Is because you don't feel like you're restricting yourself from good meals. You're not eating quinoa salad for lunch and dinner and starving yourself to death.
That's the biggest part. It's not a diet. It's just this lifestyle. It's a sapien lifestyle, really. And it's living like a human. And man, I hate being hungry. I haven't been hungry in like 5 years. It's like a foreign feeling to me because I'm eating these big satiating meals that fill me up. I eat till I'm full and then I just don't eat. I don't snack. I have no interest in snacking.
And you said you were down like 4 or 5 pant sizes since you kind of started.
Yeah, 32. I mean, I was never like a big guy. I mean, I was like a puffy guy with a 32-inch waist, and now I have a 28-inch waist, and I'm super fit, and I feel great, and I'm 38. But
I was gonna say you're approaching 40, so that's pretty impressive.
yeah, and I really think, and it's a diet. I mean, I've been athletic my whole life. I kind of mentioned that earlier, and that's sort of this baseline that I've never gone away from. Right. So if you're thinking of a scientific study, it's like, okay, well, what changed? Well, my food changed. My exercise didn't change. I think I exercised more back in the day, right? I was more active. I was playing more sports, running around. And I look back at the photos and I looked like a sausage. I was just like this puffy guy. So yeah, the food is the most important thing, right? If you're talking about health, it's the most important. I see people all the time. I'm here in Austin. Giant people, and they're just trying to work out. They're trying to get on that treadmill. They're trying to do all this. And I just want to ask them, and it's, I see them month after month, and I want to ask them, what are you eating? Like, why are you out here? I mean, it's great. Yeah, go do some exercise. But if you're just doing sort of this like just sitting on a treadmill for 45 minutes, I don't think that's going to do anything. And I'll say, yeah, lift weights instead, or do some other things instead. Maybe we can sprint. We can do some other, more like intense exercise, but really the food is where it's at.
Well, and I know from a personal standpoint, my wife is one that if she has any sort of gluten or, if we're eating out more often where there's more oils involved, like she will actually see it on her skin, how she feels. She becomes much more achy.
Mm-hmm.
And she has found out just even over the last few months that really being able to dial in her diet has improved even how she just feels from day to day. So it's something that I've been able to witness firsthand as she's changed up some of the foods that she's eating.
It's amazing.
So I'm going to circle back around to the Food Lies documentary that you were doing. How difficult was that to go down that path and start doing that, trying to gather all the information with, so much money being thrown at the processed foods and the marketing side of that?
Well, yeah, I mean, the information isn't easy to come by. Everything's working against us in this world. I have this little world that I'm in of the people who have seen through the matrix, and we've seen the truth. And the more you get into it, the more you realize, it's rigged against us. Everything is pushing towards this plant-based thing. And it kind of makes sense to me once you know more about how food works, food processing, money, all that stuff. It makes sense because they're just making more and more money, higher profit margins, way higher profit margins on all these processed foods than real foods. I'm trying to run nose to tail. I was barely making money for the first 2 years because there's no profit margin, right? You're just selling a good meat product. It takes a lot of things to raise that meat. And so it's no surprise that they can make tons of money, keep pushing this, fund the studies, fund the lobbying. Everything's working against us. And I am labeled as a quack, sort of, right? When you start talking about this stuff, it's like, hey, red meat doesn't cause heart disease, and cholesterol doesn't. If you eat cholesterol, it doesn't just make your cholesterol go up. That's not how your body works or cholesterol works. And so it's a bit hard, but there is great science out there. There's great science that no one's talking about except for a few people. Like there's a woman, Nina Teicholz, wrote a great book called The Big Fat Surprise. She spent over 9 years researching this stuff, digging through old studies, uncovering old information, all this stuff. It was hard work. And that's how hard it was. Like she did the hard work. I'll say. I'll say a lot of other people have done the heavy lifting for me on this film, spending their careers uncovering this stuff, old studies that were locked in someone's basement for 16 years. This guy, this more modern researcher, had to go to someone's basement. This old scientist, they found the study. They looked at all the papers. It was saying the opposite of our guidelines, really. It was saying that, yes, saturated fat does not cause heart disease. And so they buried it. And they asked the person why they didn't print the study. And they said, well, we were just so disappointed with the results. Right? So this is what goes on in science. Everyone has their bias. I have my bias, like I've tried to get rid of it and, go and try to see both sides of things. And I think I'm doing better at that lately, of kind of seeing both sides. But a lot of scientists they don't even know they have the bias. They just look in the literature and everything is just pointed in one way because everything's sort of just gone in that one way. Everything's been pushed in that way. It's just like, meat's bad for the environment. It's just this message that's constantly been hitting people for 50 years and they can't get around it. So when they get a result that shows that saturated fat does not correlate with heart disease, they'll say, oh, we were just so disappointed in the results. That's insane. Of course, this is what science has done. You're supposed to try to disprove yourself. You're supposed to question, why does this go against our theory that saturated fat causes heart disease? Instead of burying the study, you should do more research and figure out why. And yeah, so there's a lot of science out there. I'll kind of conclude that thought with, there is a lot of science showing the opposite, just people don't know about it. And we are presenting that in the film. And there's people like Nina Teicholz and Gary Taubes and even Mark Sisson popularizing this information that's out there. People just don't want you to know about it. I'd say, like, some of these big people, big organizations that have a vested interest in keeping, the status quo.
Yeah. Well, and I know you mentioned, like the environmental side of things. It's interesting, and I've heard you talk about this before, where, at first they'll hit you with, well, it's bad for you. And then they went kind of down the environmental role and the ethics of animals, and, kind of they've moved the goalpost of why they are against eating meat.
Mm-hmm.
And I know like guys like Rob Wolf have been very active on social media, countering that environmental argument. And it's still, it's so strange to see, people like that get suppressed on social media or shadow banned, whatever it is, when they're just trying to present an opposing argument to what's currently out there.
Yes. Rob's great. He's doing the Lord's work, as they say. I love Rob. And it's getting suspicious, I don't know if people at one point thought this was like kind of conspiracy stuff, like, oh, we're being censored, or, they have this agenda and they're pushing one side. By now, my God, it is obvious. They are blatantly censoring information that goes against the narrative in all ways. And I've seen it this whole time. So I'm just wondering how the whole world isn't up in arms, being like, wait a second, like, this is getting obvious. Like, guys, calm down. Like, I can see you guys, censoring a little bit of stuff that goes against your agenda, but now you're just blatantly just taking down studies that say, something else about COVID or something else about a different, whatever. And then you're just blatantly just blocking people from Instagram. Paul Saladino just completely kicked off Instagram.
Oh, I wasn't aware of that he got kicked off.
255,000 followers gone. This whole weekend, I've been, I keep checking his account. He's gone.
See, and, and that's something with, obviously us in the firearms industry, we've been battling stuff like this for what seems like forever, whether it be not being able to advertise or promote anything on social media, to, just even the additional hoops we have to jump through to process a credit card.
whenever we would talk about it, they're like, oh, that's just you guys making that up. That's not what's really going on. But over the last 18 months, people have become aware that these entities have much more power and influence than we knew they had a lot, but they have much more influence than we ever could have guessed. And like you said, Paul Saldino, a big part of his business, I'm sure, is his Instagram following. And you just take away 250,000 followers overnight, and I assume it probably wasn't even anything all that controversial that they shut him down for.
No, he was just asking questions. He's very careful. I mean, I've been friends with him for years. I know him and how he operates, and he's pretty careful, and I follow his posts, and he's asking questions. He asks questions, and he cites FDA or CDC or WHO data, right? If you are citing CDC data and asking questions, why is that illegal? Right? Why is that being banned? Like, yeah, I can get it if he was saying like some like quote dangerous information where he was saying everyone like do this, or like if you just eat meat you're gonna like not get COVID, whatever. If he said something like that, of course maybe they should step in, but he's never said anything like that.
Well, and I know it's very similar to, I follow Sean Stevenson online, who a lot of times he's just citing and basically clarifying the information like the CDC puts out from a scientific point of view. And he's getting suppressed and he's using their own data.
Yep.
He's not even doing his own studies. He's like, here's what they say. Here's the facts. And I know in one of his last podcasts, he talked about how he's been being censored and, suppressed on his YouTube channel because they don't agree with, his view, I should say.
It's insane. Well, I feel for the firearm industry. So I was never, I didn't care either way. I grew up in Hawaii and California, and it was just kind of, I was indoctrinated into this kind of worldview. And now I'm like totally on the other side. I'm like completely support you guys. And I see through all the agendas and the censorship campaigns, and I'm so with you. And it's so obvious, so many hoops. I think that meat's going to be this way soon. We were talking about you can't advertise, process credit cards, stuff like that. That is going to happen with meat. And so I am going to get on board with you guys because I see it happening. And like you said, the shifting the goalposts, that's happening. So yeah, they first say if they kind of get debunked on the health side, because that's kind of falling apart now because people are realizing red meat's not bad for you. Then they're like, oh, but the environment. And then, then they'll shift it more. If you start debunking the environment stuff, they're like, oh, but it's immoral. It's just so immoral to kill animals, and they'll always shift it. But the environment side is the next thing. This whole like climate change, they're just going to use this climate change thing to just wreak havoc on people, like just take away meats, change the food system just to fit this big profit global model of things.
And I've heard you say that in order to kind of combat this, that you feel like a lot of guys in your camp have to kind of stick together and start uniting more. And when you said it, I actually thought of the firearms industry, because we are bad where you'll have guys that are NRA supporters or this organization supporters, but then we are constantly attacking each other, where we all have the same general belief in regard to the Second Amendment, but we will actually have a lot of infighting. Meanwhile, the opposition will be much more united in their cause. And it's, to be honest, we've lost a lot of ground just because of all the attacking we do internally on our, the 2A side. And I heard you talk about that with like, even, like the plant-based vegan side is much more united than, some of the factions on the meat-based side.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. They're on this united front. They also have the backing of all these big organizations behind them. And so it's huge to band together. And I think I see it happening too. Even the firearms industry and the meat kind of industry, I see it kind of coalescing a little bit. I see this natural alliance forming because we're the people that have always been like, hey, stand up for your rights. Like, we need this. And it's going to be scary if they I've read articles with them trying to ban meat, or we're going to restrict it in this way, or there's stuff going on around the world about it. So same thing with the meat industry, where my sort of other whoever people out there trying to spread this information, we do get into the infighting, or like, oh, well, like you got to be strict carnivore. And then I'm like, oh, this guy, Brian's crazy. He's saying you can eat plants, it's like, we got to just not do that. But I think generally we are kind of on the same team, but yeah, we got to keep that up.
Which is good. Great to hear, actually, because like you said, they do have a lot of money behind the opposition. Even like the documentary Game Changers was heavily funded, and I'm sure much more so than what you were able to do on your side of things with the, the Food Lies documentary. Was part of the Game Changers, was that also a catalyst for you to kind of, or were you already working on yours before that came out?
I was already working on it. The process was really long. Well, Game Changers took 5 years, I heard. And yes, it was backed by James Cameron, who has either 140 or 160 million dollars invested in pea protein. So very convenient for him to make a film advocating plant-based alternatives. And yeah, I mean, that was big. Just they use a lot of great tactics and celebrities and all this type of stuff to convince people to go plant-based. And yeah, I mean, we just need to get my film out quicker.
So do you have an anticipated release date?
No, it's really hard for us because we don't have all those resources. We don't have, the Arnold Schwarzenegger and James Cameron and whoever else they have. It's just kind of me and my buddy who's, a filmmaker. So we're trying to get it done by the end of the year. And I think we have a good shot at getting it on Netflix. And we have a distribution company that helps get things on Netflix and helps with the worldwide distribution. So hopefully by the spring, it takes a while to get it going. Even when you're done, you got to go through all the hoops. But yeah, we're getting to the end.
Well, that's awesome. A couple last questions. I know you've mentioned a couple times Nose to Tail is a company that you have. But for those that aren't familiar with that, what exactly is the Nose to Tail process? I know it became big as the concept of the carnivore diet. But like I said, for those that maybe aren't aware of that, what is, in a nutshell, Nose to Tail?
Yeah. Well, yeah. So my company's called Nose to Tail, and it's nosetotale.org. But the concept of Nose to Tail is a general concept, is nose to tail eating, which is using the entire animal. And this is what we've done for all of history. And there's also tons of health benefits from this. There's benefits all around. It's like, why would we not use the whole animal? I mean, the hunting industry is big. All these hunters, I'm really glad to be aligned with hunters too. It's like firearms, hunting, the meat people. We're all on the same page here. And I love that the sort of outdoorsmen and the hunters, they respect the animals. They eat they're out there killing the animal themselves, taking it home and eating it all. A lot of time. I mean, hopefully they are, but that means eating the organs. That means, using the bones. You can make bone marrow or bone broth. You can eat bone marrow. You can just bake it. So all these things people may have heard of. I used to think before I got into this health stuff, I was like, bone broth, like what's up with that? Like, is this some stupid trend? Is this like the kale thing or something? But then I realized, oh no, bone broth, it's great for when our ancestors did it. For when it's using the whole animal. We need to respect the animal. We need to use it all. We need to not waste things. And it also has all these other nutrients. This is where you can get a bunch of minerals and you get a bunch of different fats and stuff. And this is super on collagen and stuff. Bone broth is a kind of a superfood, really. There's a great Dr. Kate Shanahan. She was the Lakers nutritionist. So she kind of got the Lakers on board with kind of a nose to tail diet. They kind of started eating more nose to tail, eating more grass-fed meat, doing bone broth. And it kind of revolutionized the NBA. This was a while back. And it's great for healing, collagen and joints and, all this stuff.
Well, I think you'll hear a lot of people prescribe it, just even trying to help restore or improve gut health.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Gut health.
One of the first things they'll recommend is bone broth.
100%. Gut health, joint health, and just overall health with all the other minerals that it comes along with. So it's the opposite of the kale like bogus thing. Like kale actually doesn't have many nutrients in it. It's kind of funny. It's like, all right, this is sort of worthless. But bone broth has a bunch of good stuff going on. So that's nose to tail eating, right? Or liver. We at nose to tail we hide it in the ground beef. So we grind up the organs, the kidney, heart, liver, and spleen, and those are all amazing nutrient sources. So if you just look this up online, you can go to like even just USDA data. Liver just lights out the most nutritious food on the planet. You can look at just straight numbers. It has so many great nutrients like vitamin A and vitamin B12 and choline and iron and copper and tons of these hard to get nutrients. I mean, you could be vegan and eat liver once a week and survive. You know what I mean? Like it would like keep you alive. I went hunting with the Hadza actually in Africa for the film. So that was an amazing experience. But, they opened up the animal for us once we got it. And first thing they do is take the liver, cut it up, and we all got a piece of the liver. We ate the raw liver. And it's no accident. They figured it out because they know that it's nutritious and they've experimented. Humans are smart, like all these hunter gatherers, they're smart. They don't know how to use computers, but like they know the earth, right? Like they are just as smart as us for hundreds of thousands of years. They're just as smart as us. Our ancient ancestors, they knew the environment way better. Like that's how intelligent they were, that they could figure out that liver is a superfood and helps make strong babies, and that, a million other things. But nose tail means eating organs, eating all the different parts, and it's super healthy. I'm learning more about it every day. Even I just did an interview with a guy, Dr. James Nicolantonio, and he's getting into all the minerals and a lot of things about, if you want to get really nerdy, the methionine to glycine ratio. So methionine is in muscle meat. So there's some people that say red meat. This is one of the little pieces of evidence that they try to use against red meat, about meat being bad for you. And they'd say, it decreases your lifespan, right? And the studies they used were actually rodent studies, and they were just giving them a whole bunch of muscle meat, right? And this is high in methionine. These are some of these amino acids that are in meat. So if you just eat straight muscle meats and you just give it to a rodent, they will do poorly, and it's because of methionine. And they figured this out because they balance it out with glycine. So glycine is from collagen, right? This is the other parts. This is the collagenous parts of the meat, and eating, bone marrow or the connective tissues, or even just eating ribs. Anytime you get something stuck in your teeth, that's good. That's a good sign. And if you're eating a ribeye on the bone, that's great. You're getting some of these bits and pieces, and the collagenous bits, that's glycine. Bone broth, that's glycine. That balances with the methionine.
And that can come from just eating it from the bone?
Yeah, exactly. So this is what, back to Dr. Kate Shanahan, she got the Lakers, and actually it went across NBA, and a lot of other teams adopted this, and it's kind of went through sports in general, but they eat meat on the bone. Like she said, okay, we're not just going to get lean, whatever meat. We're going to give you a, New York strip on the bone, whatever, ribeye on the bone. We're going to eat it, and bone broth, and whatever else. But just, you can get it. Yes. Eat it off the bone and cut it and get as much as you can, or eat ribs. And that stuff is good. That balances the methionine to glycine ratio. Once they did that with the rodents, they lived just as long. There was no difference. There was no decreased lifespan once they gave them the glycine. So it's very obvious that it was a high methionine that was a problem, not meat. So that should be a wake-up call.
Yeah, I had never heard that before. That's interesting. So, and I know, like, even I have heard, Tim Grover, who was Michael Jordan's coach, talk about one of the big things he did when he started coaching him or training him was he would actually have steak on game day.
Yep. I did hear that.
He said it completely flew in the face of what everybody else was doing on game day with high carbs, and you need that to sustain the energy. And he just basically said, he goes, okay, Michael, this isn't working. You're getting tired in the fourth quarter. Let's change it up and try something. And they switched and started having a steak. I don't remember how far in advance of the game or anything, but on every game day. And they said it was like a light switch was flipped in regard to his endurance during the, third and fourth quarter.
Well, it makes perfect sense. Steak is a superfood. That's what I'm out here to say. It's like the exact opposite of what people say. And I know tons of other people doing that. There's a woman, this sprinter. She's 40 something and she's the fastest 40 something year old in the world. And she eats a steak before every race. And mainly, I mean, that's mainly her diet too. I mean, she's eating steak all the time, but she definitely makes sure to eat it before the race. And I mean, it makes sense too. This is like sustained energy. It's full nutrition, complete amino acids and proteins and all this stuff. It's good fat. It's sustained energy. Yeah. I mean, it's amazing.
So do you eat, like when you're training, if you train hard, do you eat any carbs at all? Or are you pretty?
Now I do. I'm experimenting. I've gone full circle. Like I cut carbs out a lot for many years. I was going more in the fat adapted sort of keto type of thing. And then I'm just adding back in to try it out. But I don't think they're not necessary for training. So I did a decathlon. I was training for a decathlon and I ended up doing a pentathlon. So people know that's, 5 events in one day, or the decathlon is 10 events across 2 days, track events with sprinting and shot put and all the things. I did the pentathlon in the North American Masters Championships. So not just North American, like also Central America and the Caribbean. Bunch of people there. I didn't even eat that day. Not only did I not eat carbs, I didn't even eat food because I ate the night before. I ate just a whole bunch of burgers and bacon and cheese. And I woke up and the event was at noon. So I just fasted all, I wasn't even hungry. Had to get to the event. There's kind of just no time to eat. Well, I also wanted to do it without eating. Didn't eat any carbs. I got second place. I beat a bunch of people. They were all, drinking Gatorades and eating little bars between every event. They're snacking on these little granola bars that I'm just, hey, I'm running on fat. I'm doing great. I'm just saying it's not required. It's not required. Some people do like to eat carbs, and yes, I'm experimenting with it and seeing, what goes on. Maybe, I sleep better with carbs. People have all kinds of different things going on. But I'd like to just let people know it's not required. I mean, it takes a while to get fat adapted. You need to kind of switch over your body. And if you want to run on carbs or run on fat, it will take a few weeks, if not a month or two, to really get good at it.
Well, I know I found personally that over the last couple of months, I've been getting by with way less carbs than I used to. I think I had it in my head that I had to eat so many carbs per day. And that when I didn't, I was telling myself, well, now I'm tired. Now I don't feel as good. But after I've done it, and I will still like one day a week possibly have like just a higher carb day. It's still all very clean. It's not processed crap, but
you can have a carb up day. Yeah.
Yeah. But I'll do that like once a week. And I've had better results over the last 45 days than I've had in a long time. And I'm 46 now. So I feel better now than I did when I was in my 20s.
That's great.
I appreciate you coming on. Where can everybody find out more information on the food lies, on Nose to Tail, and then just following you like on Instagram? Or where's the best place that people can stay up to date with you?
Yeah, I guess Instagram is the best place. It's food.lies. Or if you just search food lies on Instagram, I'm there. I do post every day. And I try to make things really simple to understand. And I have like kind of funny stuff or useful stuff. I have all kinds of stuff. Yeah, it's been great doing that. People have responded well.
I've shared your Instagram with a lot of people that always say that eating's too confusing.
Mm-hmm.
So they'll be like, I don't even know where to start. So I started sharing your Instagram page. I'm like, just follow this.
I love that. Thank you.
It's very simple without having to get a food scale out or figure out your macros for the day. It's a very simple process that people can start with.
It is. And I forget that I need to just every couple days just go back to an informational post about this, because sometimes I'm just doing whatever is on my mind. And then I realize if someone's new following me, they're not getting the practical information. But yeah, I guess you could scroll back and see what I posted in the past. But there's the Peak Human podcast. I've interviewed 135 now today. Super interesting people. I'd say start back at episode 1. I think it's super valuable. I go back all the time and listen to episodes of my own from years ago and think they're really valuable. And then you can just go to sapien.org. That's my main company. And you can link out to things like Food Lies and Nose to Tail from there.
And we'll put those in the show notes as well. So final question for you is, if people want to get more actively involved or try to help promote like this side of things, is there somewhere you recommend to do that? Or how would you say a person could become more actively involved in spreading information like this?
That's a good question. I'm actually starting a side project where I'm starting like a kind of private community where we can talk about these things that are getting censored. So it's called Freely. So I just put up a landing page at freelynetwork.com. So just FREELY network.com. And I think this is my solution to all the censorship and all the stuff going on and how to connect with people. I had a big event here in Austin a couple weeks ago. We had 200 people going nuts. Just the best event ever. John Wellborn was there, our mutual friend. Like a bunch of great people were there, just spreading the word about freedom, keeping our rights, all this type of stuff. It's really special time. And I made the community basically to get, everyone was like, how do we stay in touch? How do we stay active? Like, where can we share information and all this stuff? Like, even like, what happens if they're trying to make my 4-year-old wear a mask at school? Like, what can I do? And so, we're trying to give people resources.
Are you going to try to hold more events like that?
Yeah. I'm looking into one in Florida and in LA. So I have friends in each spot. So the 2 coasts. And yeah, we'll talk. There's a section of the site, the Freely site, where it has like events, and like we're going to plan the next event. And, if a lot of people say, hey, let's do it here, and someone has a venue, we'll do it there.
That is awesome. Well, once again, thank you, Brian. I really enjoyed this, and I think people will have a lot of takeaways from it. And keep us in the loop of, I would love to attend one of those events next time you hold one.
Well, let's have one. Do you have a space? Do you know anyone with a space?
Yes, we do. we have a space here. We could do it.
Well, let's get it. I'll give you an invite to the site, and we'll start planning.
Sounds good. Thank you, Brian.